TWIF Week 3, the NFL show that I do every week, talking about the game, man. Last week was a brutal one for me, as despite having an insurmountable disadvantage early, I almost staged one of the most ridiculous comebacks in fantasy history. I was down a tremendous amount. Jalen Hurts popped off for 35. I said he would get over 30 in my preview, which he did. He's absolutely sick, and even though he only had one touchdown in the air, he still racked up 35. Jalen Hurts, great in every format, and he's part of a Philadelphia team that's going to win that division, a team that, because of the lack of competition, is in a great spot, and I think Nick Sirianni has improved a little bit, and Hurts has really improved as far as his accuracy and his passing ability goes. Last year he was almost more of a gimmick player, and this year he's a true dual threat quarterback. So I love to see that. But unfortunately, the Buffalo Bills decimated the Titans so badly that Devin Singletary didn't even get work. He essentially was benched after they got up by about 3 touchdowns and only got me a couple points. Again, a weird thing with Matt Prater is Arizona looked dead on arrival until the last couple quarters of that game, and it played out weirdly with 2-point conversions where Prater didn't really get kicks. Arizona's looked nothing like the high-powered offense I expected in the preseason, and I think Cliff Kingsbury is on the hot seat if they bomb out in the first round of the playoffs, or even fail to make it to the playoffs, which frankly is a fate that I see as tremendously unlikely, especially with the extra playoff slot. It's way harder for those fringe teams to miss the playoffs. It's much more likely for teams like the Saints and the Arizona Cardinals. Even if they have off years, they should be able to limp into the last couple wild card slots. So it's sort of annoying that with the one extra game, we can't say things like, oh, they're a 500 team anymore. But that's just sort of more of a verbal thing. Cameron Brate, absolutely fucking atrocious while Kittle was hurt. Thank God Kittle's going to play this week. He was worthless. But this is a weird game because I got the Chargers defense. They're a very hyped defense with a lot of weapons, and I saw the early part of their schedule here, these first 7 games, and said to myself, well, the first couple aren't great, but then you got Jacksonville, who looks pretty bad. I don't care what happened last week against the Jokic Colts. You can just throw that one out. Trevor Lawrence makes a lot of stupid decisions. Houston's pretty much tanking. Brissett has looked decent, and Cleveland can really run it, but they're not great. They're not world beaters. Denver, who's laughably overrated, flavor of the month team, and Seattle, who's led by Geno Smith. So this is where the Chargers defense should start to pay off. But with the Kansas City start, it really screwed me. Maybe if that was a Sunday game, I would have been more willing to roll the dice or thinking about swapping defenses, but I sort of thought that they would be able to get me at least 5, and they didn't. But this was an exciting game in the sense of the timing of it as far as who I had left, because it looked like Austin had it completely wrapped up with Aaron Jones dropping 30. The Packers defense obviously was able to contain the Bears, who were a joke. And as far as the receiving core goes, it's unimpressive. And even though Aaron Jones looked like he might suffer with a bit of a timeshare, he is getting an incredible amount of looks as far as being able to rack up offensive production, because the weapons that they got receiver-wise, the young kids just are not ready. Josh Jacobs banged up in what was a disappointing loss. Oakland was another flavor of the month team that's come out and floundered tremendously. They are really in a bad spot, looking around saying, well, we're everyone's sweetheart pick to go deep in the playoffs. And it's just been a terrible start for them. I think that Derek Carr's ceiling is a lot lower than people like to pretend it is. And they are the 0-2 team that is facing off against another 0-2 team that a lot of people thought were shoo-ins for the playoffs, and that's the Titans, whose offensive line is beat to shit. and Derrick Henry is looking pretty washed. I feel like a lot of fantasy owners are starting to hit the panic button on him a bit. And whenever these teams come out 0-2 and they look like absolute dog shit, you have to sort of say to yourself, when do we really start to jump ship as fantasy owners? Because there are only so many good fantasy players, and oftentimes players are viewed as assets because it's like, oh yeah, well he's the starting guy in that offense that doesn't really split time. Now, you never really thought about Derrick Henry in that way in these past few years. He's always been like a hard carry tier 1 guy, but he doesn't split time at all, which is really where a lot of his value came from. He was a volume ground and pound back. And if the Titans are complete shit, it's a lot like having Saquon in the past few years, where you're sort of sitting there looking at the injury history, not that happy about it, but more importantly, the offense is so anemic that you're not really getting the looks that you need, whether they be in red zone or just volume carries from a team that's playing from ahead. Jerry Jeudy has been pretty disappointing this year again. Courtland Sutton's been great. I really hit the nail on the head with that one. And I know Jeudy got banged up, but he got banged up last year. And he did have a great week 1. Yeah, they were playing Seattle. But I think that Sutton will finish the year with more fantasy points than Jerry Jeudy. Travis Kelce came up flaccid, but it didn't matter. And even though Kareem Hunt didn't find the end zone, he still put up a serviceable 7. If you can get 7.5 from your flex, even before bye weeks, you don't hate that. It really kills you in fantasy football whenever you have, look like these bottom half of my team performances, where the bottom half combines for 6 points, and you're sitting yourself saying, well, oh great, I had Diggs and Hurts combined for nearly 70, and I'm still going to lose just because Prater got one measly point after touchdown. Brait is completely worthless and dim, and the Chargers are overrated. And I almost would have rather just lost by fucking 40 and for Hurts to save his big performance for next week. But it was a really close game there at the end. And it was a performance where I was actually ahead by a touch. And you had A.J. Brown sort of acting as the blocker who was doing nothing until the second half. And then Hurts had a lollipop pass to, I think, Kenneth Gainwell, who just let it bounce right off his hands for an interception, and that really sunk me. So AB escapes. He's at 2-0, and if only Ben was here to see it. The good Christian boy Weston put up 130 against the commish. And the thing that jumps out to me about this game is St. Brown dropping 30, and the Detroit Lions, man, they showed grit. And I really love to see these Lion performances where they come out and win. They absolutely were dumpstering Washington early and didn't look back. It was one of those games where this happened a lot in week 2, where a team had an insurmountable advantage and sort of let off the gas a little bit, and it allowed the other team to make it look a little bit closer in the box score than it should have been. The Rams-Falcons game comes to mind, which was 31-27. The Falcons were dead from like 10 minutes in on. The Cardinals and Raiders was funny because the Raiders were up 20-0 at one point and just choked it away. I think the Raiders are poorly coached, and I think the Chargers are poorly coached too, which makes them a lot worse than they should be. You have people that look at them on paper and almost got really happy about the pieces that were in place and sort of put the cart before the horse and forgot about coaching. The Niners look good. Trey Lance going down actually makes them a better team. I like Jimmy G better than Trey Lance. Obviously he's older, but he's a playoff proven quarterback, and they're not a shitter team that just lost a bunch of games and don't have a future for years and years where they need to be giving Trey Lance looks. This is a team that can make the playoffs and win a couple rounds with Jimmy G at the helm. So if you're a 49ers weapon fantasy owner like me with Brandon Ayuk or George Kittle, this is actually a buff. And whenever you consider Weston's team, DJ Moore put up 10. This is a guy that I was targeting, and I think is going to do pretty well, even though the Carolina Panthers are choking. But St. Brown really carries Weston hard there with the 2 touchdowns. So Weston moves to 1-1. Lilly has an uneventful game against Jackson where Jalen Waddle pops off in that epic game, and Tyreek Hill also popped off. If you're going to watch any VOD from week 2 of this season, you're going to want to watch that game, Baltimore and the Dolphins. Crazy for Trey Lance to go down with putting up 2 points and Jackson still wins. If you look, Rashad Penny, this is a guy we knew would have no value going into the season. Jefferson went flaccid as Philly absolutely monster moded Minnesota, who just looks fucking clueless. For about 3 years now, they've looked clueless and inept, Minnesota. They're no longer a team that can sort of be run in defense first. They sort of played stylistically similar to the Titans at the prime, like the Titans 2 years ago and the Vikings about 5 years ago played this ground and pound like defense ball control style. Well, they just don't have the defense for it anymore, Minnesota. So they're just a shit team, to be frank. And you sort of know that they're going to be disappointing. And again, they've gotten so bad that it's almost nerfed their weapons down. Like Dalvin Cook, really not that good. Remember, he was a tier 1 guy. Adam Thielen, hard fucking wash. Justin Jefferson's the only guy you're really looking to, and he's going to be inconsistent. So Lilly misses a huge opportunity with Jackson losing his quarterback. Anytime your quarterback goes down like early in a game, severe injury, and like locks in for less than 5, it should be an auto loss. So Lilly really drops the ball here, frankly. Spencer putting up a droopy 132 versus Cameron, who started the Dolphins defense in that insane shootout. Again, watch the VOD if you didn't. Kyler Murray again, gets fantasy points despite looking horrible. And that's the funny thing about everyone but the kicker on Arizona, apparently, is even if they fail the eye test in the game, a lot of times they'll still be really good for fantasy value. Nick Chubb's been an absolute monolith. Brissett being better than average has allowed him to maintain his value. And he's been getting a lot of touchdowns despite Hunt still getting decent amount of looks. Jamar Chase is a guy a lot of people drafted like in the first 17 picks. The Bengals look fucking terrible and have such severe offensive line issues. I think they might miss the playoffs. If we weren't looking at a Steelers team that is the worst it's been since basically Mike Tomlin got there, open bracket parentheses, since Big Ben retired, I think you could realistically be saying they're going to miss the playoffs. I think the Browns will win 10 games, and I think Baltimore will win 11 or 12. So the Bengals could easily miss the playoffs. Kyle Pitts, disappointing. Again, they play a team that they really are able to put points up on during dumpster time, and Kyle Pitts still can't get anything done. This was one of the most overrated guys both this year and next year, which it's pretty crazy to be overrated in 2 consecutive years. But expect the Atlanta Falcons to do nothing all season. They're going to be a joke. Buccaneers put up a big point total against Jameis Winston solo losing the game. That was just like a horrifically boring game that both teams deserved to lose. The idea that like Jameis Winston has, become this disciplined guy is a joke. With Sean Payton being gone, he's back to his old ways, just less explosive. Scary Terry, you're just looking at Washington's offense and saying, it's gotten so bad that, again, the guys have almost lost value. Saquon on a 2-0 Giants team was great in the first week against Tennessee, but you've really got to look at this Tennessee team and say to yourself, how bad are they going to be? They're going to be like 12 losses, like total garbage bad. It's how a lot of people are talking at the moment. And if Tennessee comes out in week 3 and wins their game in convincing fashion, people are going to completely flip around and act like, oh, well, they're back on track. It's very funny how reactionary people can be. And it's a big reason why I like to record these TWIFs and get a sort of week-to-week picture. Because if Tennessee gets their shit together and finishes the season with, let's say, like 11 wins and wins a playoff game, no one's going to remember these first 2 weeks. But that Tennessee-Vegas Raider game that kicks off at nooner is going to be one that I've got my eyes on because both teams really need that game. And if they hit 0-3, it's going to be like a complete panic mode, oh shit moment for either of those squads, which were both expected to make the playoffs. So Spencer takes it down. Markey, who still hasn't set his fucking profile picture, pops off for a Seagouch in-house rivalry. And what obviously jumps out about this game was, despite the fact that the Dolphins were down early, Tua led this insane comeback where he threw up 6 pass tutties, which equated to 50 points, and Ryan had the discount double points. Extreme explosiveness behind that with Tyreek Hill, of course. And like I said when Ryan drafted this team's going to have insane pop-off weeks, and Hill and Kupp combined for 50, something that I joke about happening on a weekly basis, but you don't often expect the quarterback to also put up 50. Ryan could have won with 3 fucking people, and that's really all that needs to be said about this game. Niners had a good week versus Seattle, of course. And if you're Seagouch, you really got to be panicking about having Burrow and Mixon, because this was a top side of your lineup that you expected to be doing very well, and they just look fucking lost with the lack of line. And Swift is getting his red zone looks vultured by Williams, so Seagouch might be hitting the panic button here. We're looking to shake things up in a trade. Rampy embarrassed by the new guy, just making a fucking fool of himself. Could have started Stafford, asked Spencer what to do. Spencer said start Stafford. He started Cousins, who threw up on himself, but it doesn't matter. And I'm just not impressed at all by Aaron's team. Okay, he got Adams. That's great. And Adams is on what looks to be the most flashy, overhyped team of the offseason. Dillon only put up 6, and he rushed for 18 times in a game where they were ahead the whole time. That's sort of a joke. Cordell Patterson, a guy who was great last year, but the fact of the matter is that he's on a Marcus Mariota offense, and that's basically a sinking ship in terms of real life and fantasy value. Metcalf, unplayably bad this season. Goddard, I don't hate, but the crux of the issue with tight ends is getting those red zone and tutty looks. As any person who's been watching the Eagles with a close eye over the last couple of years knows, Jalen Hurts is a vulture when it comes to those red zone touchdowns. That's why I picked him up. I really don't like the Green Bay focus of this team. I think unless you have Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay's fantasy value has been severely nerfed down. And I think it's funny the Cowboys got 6 sacks against Burrow and still only got 7 fantasy points. Hate this Aaron team. Hate it. And we're going to jump into week 3, where unfortunately we see Aaron is playing me, so this is a must-win game. We're both 0-2, and Aaron is definitely going to do better this week than he did last week. I'm just going to assume that his lineup is set. That's part of why I've been doing TWIF later, so I don't have to sit here and try to fucking shadow box who's going to start where, because that's a waste of time. But if you're looking at this matchup, if you're a Cousins owner and you're going to have him on your fucking team, this is when you start him, right? He's playing Detroit, he's playing at home, but on the other side of the coin, he's got Stafford. He's playing soft-ass Arizona. Man, oh man, to me, that game is probably going to shoot out, and anytime you play Arizona, you've got to expect your offensive players to do well. I would start Stafford personally. Rampy can get cute. I mean, if you're going to roster both these guys, you're going to end up starting Stafford in some of these games. I think that's what he told himself last week, too. Hurts is playing Washington. I expect him to drop 30. Darrell Henderson didn't get as many touches as Cam Akers. That's just a pain in the ass situation to deal with. Henderson did get the tutty. And I'm in the situation where I have Najee, who gets all the looks in a shoddy offense, And I have Melvin Gordon, who has some value, but not much. He's definitively still the backup, even though he's getting double-digit looks barely. And Cam Akers is getting quite a few looks too. Honestly, I kind of want to trade both of the Rams running backs to Ryan, who, remember, has both the Cowboys running backs, and get like Hill or Cooper Kupp back in the deal, or maybe even trade like a Najee or a Singletary, who is on the most explosive offense in football. But I almost don't want to have both these guys. Like, I have enough running back depth from my perspective where I'm always going to be starting Harris because he's a funnel, and I'm always going to be starting Singletary because he gets the lion's share on a great offense that's always going to be playing from ahead. And it's almost like both Akers and Henderson sort of have the same value. Like, they're both good RB2s. It's just a vexing situation to be in. And you would say like, oh, we have the handcuffs, so if one goes down, it'll be great. I'm almost sitting here saying like, I'd rather have fucking one guy, and then I can feel good about flipping the coin. Sutton's been great for me this season. He works out stylistically great with Russell Wilson. Love that shit. And this is the sort of thing that, like, you can still derive value from, even in a team that's not that good, because they pair up stylistically well and they're going to be playing from behind a lot. Diggs has been fucking amazing. He gets a lot of mid-range looks and he gets long-range looks. He gets a plethora of targets and a high-powered offense with a great quarterback. This is a first-round pick that you can be proud of. Dropped 3 touchdowns last week and almost solo carried me with Hurts. Great in all formats. You'll just love him. The Bills got ahead so hard, so fast that Singletary sort of fucked me. I saw Spencer picked up his backup on the waiver. I don't expect any value there. I snagged Godwin, who JP dropped, who's still banged up. BFD. Also Hawkinson, who I loved in case Kittle didn't play this week, but thankfully he's not even carrying an injury designation. Think Henderson finds the end zone here. Diggs scores 15 in what's the most exciting marquee matchup, the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. Huge test game for Miami, and if you're Buffalo, you're pretty much expected to make the AFC title game, so the game doesn't mean as much. But huge game for San Francisco. I expect Kittle will do well with Jokey G throwing to him. I actually really like my team this week. I think Arizona and LA will be a great week, and that game will shoot out. And I think idiot Trevor Lawrence is going to throw a lot of interceptions. I'm thinking 2+. If the over-under is like 2, I'm taking the over, presumably with good odds. So to me, this is a must-win game for me, and I take it down with 110 points. Clap 4 and Jacks. Lamar will pop off. I love Jackson starting Joe Flacco, who's been great in New York. The Jets and Giants are both 2-0. That's crazy. Expect both of them to lose. This is like a hilarious must game for Cincy, because after hilariously losing in week 1 after self-inflicted injuries, they were playing an auto-win game against the Cowgirls and lost that one despite like coming back and getting 2-minute drilled by fucking Cooper Rush. Now they're playing the Jokic Jets, who weeks ago were all bummed out about Zach Wilson being hurt, and it was just going to be another failed JETS jokes season. But no, Joe Flacco is here to stay and play. James Conner, Christian McCaffrey, I love that core. I'm really scared about Arizona in general, but you can't really be that scared about James Conner and Kyler Murray specifically, and I would fucking lump the kicker in there too, except last week happened where I got absolutely screwed. I also think Cliff Kingsbury is way more likely to go for 2 than other coaches, and has like a lot of like 2-point gimmick plays that he's more willing to do. So maybe the Cards kicker wasn't as good as I thought. Speaking of good kickers, Justin Tucker, expect him to eat up this week. David Montgomery against Houston. I mean, if you got David Montgomery, you've got to love him against Houston, right? So I look at him against Jackson's running backs and don't have a lot of faith. Tyler Higbee will probably grab 8, but I'm really liking I'm liking the commish here. I think Jackson will solo carry him. Lamar, that is. Lilly and Weston. Change your name, Weston. Christian boy. Jared Goff start. Love that versus Minnesota. He'll get 22. Debo will get over a dozen against Denver. St. Brown will get 15. I think Higgins is due to pop off against the Jets. I think Cincy do well against the Jets and salvage their season. I don't know if it'll be necessarily as much as a blowout as Cincy fans thought before the season started. I don't like anything about Lilly's team other than Mahomes, who's playing a hapless indie team. Their coach is on the hot seat, as well as incredibly dim-witted. Indy just looks horrific. Advantage Weston. Here we have Cam, who's somehow looking horrific at week 3. Man, projected a measly 67 points. That's just crazy. I think Burrow and Mixon combined for 40. Is Swift playing? List is questionable. If he doesn't play, Seagouch has the running back depth. And to me, this is like a pretty easy Seagouch win, even though he has a lot of mediocrity locked in. I don't trust Pittman at all, but there's just nothing to like on Cam's team. Bunch of question marks about the Chargers. Herbert has a severe rib injury. If he plays, he won't be that great. That diminishes Eckler's value. That diminishes the value of Mike Williams. And guess what? Scary Terry's value has also been diminished severely. I think Saquon will do pretty well against Dallas. Saquon could hard carry him. I think I've been saying that Saquon can hard carry Cam, and that's his win condition for like the last 3 years. Advantage Gouch. Let's move on. Here we have Ryan against Spencer. This is a true test for the Boz, but I actually think it was bad for Hill and Tua to combine for 80. And I said this in my post-draft episode where it's sort of dangerous to have those guys on your team because they'll burn you and solo lose you games, and they'll have absolutely insane games like what they had in that previous week, week 2, and that was like the absolute highest peak performance from both of them. And you just can't expect that. You can expect performances like that sometimes, and you're sort of having a groovy combo there with Tua and Tyreek, where obviously since Tyreek is a receiver and not a running back, if one pops off, so will the other. And that's nice, and you have a massive ability to put up disgusting points like that, but you're going to get burned a lot, and when you don't have running back depth, you can really get screwed over, and you're going to have really big issues putting up points consistently. So when I see Ryan drop an insane amount like that, I'm happy for him, and it's good that he won, but I sort of feel like he wanted to trade a little bit after week 1, like he sort of was identifying his weakness. And then three of your guys combine for 100, and it's really easy to tell yourself, even if you're an experienced owner, which Ryan isn't, oh, I don't need to fucking trade anyone. Look at that, I just dropped 150. So I think that he's going to be really confident going into this week, and that could bite him in the ass because I still think this is a team with holes. I think it's also interesting that the Dallas Cowboys play a weak-ass Giants team who is very oddly 2-0. This again, the Giants and Jets are both 2-0, but they're a very weak 2-0. And I think that the Cowboys are high and mighty coming off of that Cincy win, and if they were playing a more difficult team, I'd be sitting there saying, man, the Cowboys are going to get destroyed, but that'll be a very interesting game to watch on Monday night. I don't think that the Miami Dolphins will be able to go crazy against the Buffalo Bills defense like they did Baltimore, and I think that will be the key factor in Ryan losing this. Chubb's already locked in another great week, which will help Spencer tremendously. Kyle Pitts is playing Seattle. If he's going to do well, it'll be this week. And Jamar Chase, again, playing the Jets. If you have a Bengals asset, this is the week for them to break out. Advantage Spencer. And here we have two 2-0 teams. This is a very important game for AB, who's already locked in mediocrity at the bottom of his lineup. Josh Allen, terrifying. Jonathan Taylor, not as scary as he was, as the Colts look pretty fucking floppy here. Leonard Fournette against Green Bay. Injury designation. Expected to play. Haven't loved them. Haven't loved the Bucks. Yeah, this game has AB winning written all over it, but I don't love this Wentz start. I feel like there are better options out there. And AB has a couple guys banged up. But I still think he takes the victory because when I look at this, I think that Josh Jacobs is going to get over 10. And I think that Kelsey has like a disgusting week against Indy and hard carries him. So that's the TWIF. Enjoy, like, sub, say easy.